She heard the glass first, an indecent shatter that ripped through the silence like a scream. In the same breath, the wind seemed to vanish, replaced by the howl of some primal instinct rising in her chest. Her feet refused to move. Her breath hitched. And then, without understanding how, she was crying. It wasn't sobbing. It was the kind of cry that comes before the sound, the body's revolt when the mind is still scrambling for context. The nursery monitor crackled with soft static. Behind her, she had just checked on Ava, just poured a glass of Merlot, just turned off the lights in the living room. And now, somewhere downstairs, someone was in their home. The footsteps were not cautious. That was the first thing that terrified her. No hesitation, no scuffle or whisper of doubt, just a clean, deliberate set of boots on hardwood. Whoever was in the house wasn't stealing. He was searching. She reached for the phone only to find her fingers trembling too violently to type. The emergency number was muscle memory, but muscle was failing her. The hallway outside the master bedroom seemed impossibly long, the shadows deeper than they should have been, as if the architecture itself had turned against her. She could hear the hum of the smart security system, offline. Her husband had told her just yesterday it was under maintenance. It had felt like one of his many harmless eccentricities. Now it felt like betrayal. The doorknob rattled. Her eyes snapped to the heavy walnut door as it trembled in its frame. She backed away, hands raised as if her palms could repel violence. She looked around for something, anything. But this was a curated home, minimalist, tasteful. No bats, no knives, no heavy lamps, just art, just polished floors, just vulnerability. The door slammed open and he stepped in, not masked, not covered. A man in his late 30s, salt and pepper stubble, eyes that didn't blink. His jacket, hours wet from rain, and he held a crowbar in one hand, low like it wasn't his weapon but his badge. He scanned the room until he saw her. His mouth twitched but didn't smile. "Where is he?" the man asked. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. The man stepped forward. Then everything exploded in light and thunder. A single gunshot tore through the air. The crowbar hit the floor before the man did. He screamed, not from the wound but from surprise. Another voice, familiar, furious, ripped through the moment like a blade. "Step away." There he was. Her husband, silhouetted in the hallway, black pistol in both hands, face etched with something ancient, rage or fear or control. He advanced fast, crossing the room like a man possessed, never lowering the weapon. The intruder scrambled backward, clutching his shoulder, blood spreading in a black stain through the jacket. He tried to speak, but the words came out garbled. "I said step away," her husband shouted again, finger trembling on the trigger. The man on the floor obeyed. He collapsed against the wall, panting. Her husband kicked the crowbar away, then moved to check the wound. Only then did he lower the gun. She couldn't breathe, she couldn't move. Paramedics came first, then police, then the endless, smothering wave of questions. Her husband gave a statement with the crisp precision of someone who had done it before. The man had broken in. He had refused to leave. The homeowner had defended his family. That was it. The detective, Sergeant Malloy, took notes, but her eyes lingered too long on the husband. Like she'd seen this dance before and the steps didn't quite match the music. The injured man was taken away, still unconscious. No ID, no clear motive, no explanation. The next morning her husband brewed coffee like nothing had happened. Same robe, same slippers. He whistled softly, as if the night had just been a dream he'd already forgotten. But there was something. Find his eyes when he handed her the mug, something colder than shock. Something calculating. "Are you all right?" he asked. She nodded. But she was already wondering why he hadn't asked where Ava was, or why he'd kept a gun, fully loaded, in the drawer of his desk when he'd always claimed to hate them, or how he'd arrived so fast when he'd said he was in a meeting downtown. Later that day she checked the hallway security panel. Still offline, she called the company. They confirmed the account had been disabled manually 2 days prior. She didn't tell him. That night she stayed awake beside him, listening to the sound of his breathing. He slept like a man who had protected his home, like a hero. But her eyes were fixed on the drawer across the room, the one with the gun, the one she hadn't known about. Downstairs, the shattered glass had already been swept. The blood scrubbed. Away. But on the edge of the windowsill, just behind the curtain, she found something they'd missed. A ring, silver, engraved inside with 2 initials, JC, and it fit her husband's pinky perfectly. She kept it in her jewelry box. Hidden. She didn't know yet whether it was proof of something lost or something beginning. The blood had seeped deep into the ivory Berber carpet. No amount of scrubbing would disguise its stain. She had watched the cleaning crew come and go, gloved and indifferent, treating the aftermath like any other job, but she couldn't unsee it. A dark blotch right where the man had collapsed, and every time she walked past it, even days later, her stomach turned. There had been no follow-up from the hospital, no updates from the police, just silence, as if the man had never existed at all. As if a human being hadn't bled out on her bedroom floor with her baby asleep just one door away. She started noticing the details that didn't add up. The gun was the first. Her matte black Sig Sauer with a custom grip, monogrammed. Not something you picked up at a pawn shop or stashed away for emergencies. This was a weapon curated with care. When she asked her husband where he'd gotten it, he smiled and said, "Business? Gift. Years ago, that was all. No elaboration, no invitation for more. Just that tight, practiced smile he used when discussing things that lived outside the boundaries of their marriage. And that was becoming a pattern. Every time she brought up the break-in, quietly, carefully, he dismissed it. The guy was a junkie, he said one evening. Desperate, random, unfortunate, let's not fixate. But the word random throbbed like a bruise in her brain. Because the intruder hadn't taken anything, hadn't gone for the electronics or the safes or the art on the walls. He had walked through their home like a man looking for something specific. Or someone. And then there was the police. Sergeant Malloy returned 4 days after the incident, unannounced, standing in the doorway with a clipboard and an unreadable expression. "Just tying loose ends," she'd said, but her questions were surgical. "Did you recognize the suspect?" "No." "Had he contacted you before?" "No." "Do you know anyone named James Carr?" That last one stuck. "No," she lied. Too fast. She'd Googled the initials from the ring the night she found it. JC, 100 names, 100 lives, but none tied cleanly to her husband. No James Carr. And yet, here it was, from a detective's mouth, as if she wasn't the only one chasing ghosts. When her husband came home that night, she didn't mention Malloy's visit. Instead, she watched his face when she casually asked if he'd ever known a man named Carr. His response was a blink too slow. "Carr? No, why?" She shrugged. "Just a name that popped into my head." He turned back to his laptop, but the air had shifted. She felt it. He knew something. That night, she waited until he was asleep and crept back to the office. She had learned his password months ago, purely out of curiosity, she'd told herself then. A string of numbers tied to a yacht they'd once chartered off the Amalfi coast. She typed it in, and the screen bloomed awake. His inbox was surgical, organized, into folders purged of clutter. But in the archives buried 3 years deep, she found an old thread titled Island Account. The email was brief. "Can't move the funds until Carr signs off. He's ghosting again. We'll need leverage. Sent from someone listed only as DM." She took a screenshot and forwarded it to herself, then deleted the sent item. Her hands were trembling again. The name, the ring, the silence. Whatever had happened, whatever storm was circling, it wasn't over. She knew that now. The next morning, her husband suggested a weekend away. "Just us," he said. "Let's leave this house behind for a bit, get some air." "Where?" she asked, careful not to sound suspicious. "Malibu, or maybe Tahoe." She stared at him. The man who'd killed an intruder in their bedroom less than a week ago was suggesting a ski weekend. She nodded. "I'll pack," but she didn't pack. She waited until he was out at the gym and opened the drawer in the office again, the one with the gun. It was empty now, but behind the pens she found something else, a photo, a small faded print tucked beneath a false bottom. 4 people standing in front of a plane. Her husband. A woman with sharp eyes and sun-drenched hair. A man she didn't recognize. And another man whose face had been cut away with scissors, surgically like he was never meant to be remembered. Written on the back in a looping scrawl, St. Thomas, 2016. That night, she couldn't sleep. The picture felt hot in her hand. She kept returning to the email, "We'll need leverage," and to the ring JC. If the man who broke in was James Carr, and if he had once had power over her husband, financial, legal, emotional, then the break-in wasn't random. It was retaliation, or desperation, or both. In the morning, she asked a question she had been dreading. "Why don't we talk to a lawyer?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "About what?" "The shooting, the break-in. What if the man sues or dies?" He waved her off. "It's self-defense. I have people for that. Don't worry." But she did worry, because she hadn't said the man's name, and he hadn't asked. That night, she reached out to an old college friend who worked in financial forensics. She sent her the screenshot of the email, just asking, "Can you trace this account?" "DM means anything to you?" The reply came within hours. "Don't use your home network again. This name is flagged. Call me." She shut off the computer, her breath caught in her throat. Downstairs, she heard her husband laughing on the phone. That smooth, polished laugh he used in boardrooms and charity events, the one that always sounded like it was hiding something. In the nursery, Ava stirred in her sleep, unaware that the house she'd been born into was becoming something else, entirely. The next morning, the bloodstain on the carpet was gone, professionally replaced, but in her mind it was still there, like a map to something unspeakable. And she was beginning to understand that the real intruder hadn't come through the window that night. He had been living here all along. The footage didn't make sense, not because of what it showed, but because of what it refused to. She sat, alone in the spare bedroom, laptop open, playing back the files she'd requested under the guise of household insurance validation. The security company had sent everything recorded on the night of the break-in from the 2 external cameras, still functioning at the time. One faced the front driveway, the other the pool area at the rear. The other's garage, foyer, hallway had been deactivated 2 days earlier, remotely, by someone with admin access. Only 2 people had that level of access. She didn't remember authorizing anything. Her finger hovered over the spacebar as the timestamp ticked past midnight. She watched the man enter the frame, hood pulled back, soaked through, breathing hard as if he'd run from something far worse than rain. He walked up the gravel path like he'd been there before, pausing only once to glance at the camera. Not with fear, with recognition. She rewound, paused at the look on his face. Not rage, not confusion. He looked sad. She turned up the volume. The microphone on that particular camera was rarely useful. Birds, leaves, static. But in the quiet, just before he reached the window, she caught a sound. A word, barely a whisper. She looped it again and again until it no longer sounded like static. Aaron. Not her name. Not the baby's. Not even hers. Aaron. She sat back, hands cold. It was her husband's middle name, a detail she'd barely remembered until now. He never used it, never signed it, but she'd seen it once, on an old passport, now expired. The man had come for him. She called the security company and asked for the raw backup from the previous week. For insurance purposes, she repeated, fake casual. They said they'd comply within 24 hours. She knew she might not have that long. By noon, she had returned to the photo she'd hidden inside the pages of a cookbook. St. Thomas, 2016. The woman in the photo had haunted her all week. She ran a reverse image search using a cropped version, hoping for nothing, hoping to be wrong. The results came back fast. Tess Chandler, financial advisor, convicted in absentia for embezzlement and conspiracy in 2017, believed deceased. Her heart thumped. The name meant nothing to her, but the face was unmistakable. She printed the article and placed it beside the photo. Her husband had once vacationed, conspired with a fugitive, someone the world had declared dead. And beside her, the man whose face had been cut from the photo, maybe James Carr, a man who had now appeared in their bedroom, bleeding and shouting her husband's name. The 4th person in the image remained unknown, unsuspiciously smiling. Just another ghost. That night she waited until her husband was in the shower and used his phone to search his recent messages. No texting apps, no emails. But in the call history, there was one oddity, an unsaved number, dialed twice over the... Last week, once the night of the break-in, she copied it down. The following morning, she used a burner app to make the call. A man answered on the third ring. There was silence when she didn't respond. "Hello?" the voice asked again. Older, tired, American with a raspy edge. She ended the call. That afternoon, Sergeant Malloy returned. She wasn't in uniform this time. Her tone was different, less formal, more conspiratorial. "I'm not supposed to share this," she began, standing in the kitchen like a woman who'd come to confess rather than investigate. "But the man who broke in, James Carr, we finally ID'd him." She said it like she already knew the name wasn't news. "I'm sorry," the wife replied softly. "Who?" "Don't do that," Malloy said, not unkindly. "Just don't. He's linked to an ongoing investigation, multiple jurisdictions, offshore holdings, embezzlement, federal charges. But here's the weird part." She lowered her voice. "There's no arrest record. He's never been convicted of anything. But we have photos of him, with your husband 5 years ago." The world narrowed. "Where?" she asked. "St. Thomas, at a private airstrip. We think Carr used to work for a hedge fund front. We think your husband did too." She wanted to ask how much they really knew. Instead, she said nothing. Just stood there and let the implications bloom inside her. Malloy studied her face. "If he ever contacts you again, call me directly." "Not the station." She handed over a card with a number scribbled in pen. Then she left. Her husband arrived, home shortly after. He kissed her cheek, made a joke about terrible traffic, poured himself a drink. But she watched him more carefully now. Watched the small delays between questions and answers, the way he avoided discussing that night, how his smile tightened at the edges when the past flirted too close to the present. "Aaron," she whispered to herself when he left the room. She needed to know what James Carr had come to say, what had been taken, what was still owed. She returned to the footage, replayed the word, rewatched the moment he looked into the camera and whispered Aaron like a prayer or a warning. By midnight, the backup footage from the security company arrived. She downloaded it, trembling slightly. At 8:42 p.m. on the night of the break-in, nearly 4 hours before the shatter of glass, a motion sensor on the garage had triggered. A figure stood in the shadows, unmoving outside the frame, not breaking in, waiting, not for her, for him. And just before the footage skipped, corrupted or scrubbed, she heard one more whisper. A second word. Tess. The woman in the photo. The dead one. But if Carr had come to warn them, if that was what this was, then who had silenced him and who was Tess running from? She closed the laptop, heart hammering. Someone was erasing the past, but not fast enough. It was disguised as something mundane, a change in rhythm, a new behavior. He started locking the office door. Always had before, he claimed. But she knew better. She had lived alongside his patterns for nearly 8 years, long enough to sense when a door was closing, not for privacy, but for protection. The locks were mechanical, not digital, easily picked. Especially when you'd grown up with a locksmith for a father and had long ago learned how to open silence like a drawer. She waited for the perfect moment. A charity gala he couldn't. "Miss?" And she feigned a migraine to stay behind. The car had barely rounded the corner when she slipped into the office with her homemade tension wrench and rake. 30 seconds. That's all it took. The lights were already on. He always left them glowing warm like the room itself was posing for a magazine shoot. The desk, a flawless slab of black walnut, sat clean as ever. No paper, no dust, no signs of a life lived, messily. But behind the painting of their wedding in Positano, half sickening now in its romantic opulence, was a keypad. The safe had been there for years, a design feature, he'd once joked. She typed in the code. Not her birthday, not their anniversary. She tried Ava's birth date, nothing. Then, almost without thinking, she entered the yacht's charter number. The same code he used for his laptop. The light blinked green. Inside was not money or passports or gold. There were letters, dozens of them, stacks of envelopes bound with waxed twine, arranged in clusters. Most were unsigned, many typed. But the content made her stomach twist. References to meetings in undisclosed safe zones, mention of divesting and mirror accounts, phrases like collapse scenario, offshore purges, and, twice, Tess is losing control. The ink blurred in one letter, where someone had pressed the pen too hard while writing, "Leverage must be visual, no more digits." He reacts to faces, and then, tucked behind the last envelope, was the object that would undo whatever illusions she had left. A phone. Burnt orange case. Old model, no charger. It turned on with 17% battery, and on it, a single folder labeled fail-safe. Inside, 10 photographs, all taken candidly. All of her. One outside Ava's preschool, one at the gym, one through the bedroom. Window.1 in the tub. She dropped the phone. Her skin went cold. It wasn't surveillance, it was insurance. Someone had been watching her. He had been watching her, or someone had on his behalf. And these photos had been deemed necessary to keep. Not just necessary, but essential enough to hide inside a wall. She backed out of the room slowly, careful not to disturb anything, and relocked the door behind her. She deleted her fingerprints from the doorknob with her sleeve. Her heart was thudding in a staccato rhythm now, one she knew would never fully return to normal. The silence in the house was no longer comforting. It had become surveillance itself. She barely slept that night. Every creak in the house was a whisper, every shadow a potential camera. She woke twice in cold sweat, and once with a scream, she had to muffle into the sheets. In the morning he returned as if nothing had happened, kissed her forehead, asked how her migraine was. She smiled, said it was better. Later that day, she printed one of the photos from the burner phone and slid it into a manila envelope. No return address, no signature. She mailed it to herself. She needed a record, something outside the house. A breadcrumb that couldn't be burned. By evening, she'd contacted her college friend again, the financial forensics expert. "I need to trace something else," she whispered over the encrypted line. "Ever heard of someone called DM?" Long pause. "You're in deep," her friend finally said. "Deeper than I can help with. Tell me anyway." Only one DM ever came up in the Cayman accounts. Daniel Mercer, alias, no verified identity, ghost contractor, high level, asset coordinator. He brokered asset transfers for people, disappearing. Disappearing? People like Tess Chandler. The name sounded like a curse now. Are they dead? Only if someone paid for it. She hung up, hands trembling. That night, she watched her husband drink bourbon by the fire and stroke Ava's hair while she played with puzzle pieces on the floor. The picture of calm, a protective father, a charming, wealthy husband, and possibly, very possibly, the architect of a false death. She asked him softly, "Did you ever know someone named Daniel?" He didn't flinch, but she saw it anyway. That microscopic pause in breath, the pivot behind the eyes. "Daniel," he repeated. "A few, why?" Old photo came up. From the Positano trip, he smiled. Long time ago. And then he poured her a drink. That night, she returned to the safe one last time, just long enough to replace everything exactly as it had been. But she kept one photograph. Not the surveillance of her, not the letters, the last photo in the stack. One she hadn't noticed until the final second, before closing the door. It was Tess. Not dead. Standing beside James' car, in what looked like a train station. No timestamp, no location. But her eyes, those unmistakable eyes, stared directly into the lens, unafraid. There was a reflection in the glass behind them. A man, half obscured, holding the camera. She zoomed in, breath held. It was her husband. Smiling, and between his fingers the faint glint of a wedding ring. But not their wedding. Someone had taken vows before her. Someone who might never have left. The past hadn't just returned. It had never gone away. The envelope arrived on a Wednesday, unmarked and smelling faintly of adhesive and sea salt. No return address, no stamps. It hadn't passed through any postal system. Someone had placed it directly into their mailbox, slipped it in like a threat pretending to be paperwork. She found it while Ava napped, in the short breath of silence that passed for peace now. Inside, There was no letter. No warning. Just a single page of legalese, clipped to a certified court copy of a last will and testament. The name at the top, Teresa Chandler, Tess. The document was filed in the British Virgin Islands and dated almost 4 years prior. In it, Tess had named a single beneficiary to a trust marked confidential. That beneficiary, Alexander Aaron Huxley, her husband. The sum, $11.4 million, no conditions. No disclaimers, just a transfer. She reread the number 3 times. It might as well have been blood inked on vellum. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't move. Every atom in her body tilted inward, collapsing toward the singularity of that number and the name attached to it. Alexander Huxley was the heir to a dead woman who wasn't dead. The woman in the photo, the woman in the whispers, the woman who, by all appearances, had faked her death, left behind millions, and had trusted him with it. Or had she? Because if Tess had meant for him to have that money, why had Carr broken into their home with her name on his lips? Why had a folder full of surveillance photos existed inside a hidden wall? Why were there whispers of offshore accounts, purges, leverage? Unless the will hadn't been a gift, unless it had been bait. She scanned the bottom of the document. A signature, unmistakably Tess's, flourished, looping. She remembered it from the article, from the court indictment images. And beside it, a witness, Daniel Mercer, the ghost again. The same alias that had floated like a shark through every trail she'd uncovered. He was the witness to the will, the handler of funds, the architect of vanishing. DM, her husband, came home late that night. The smell of smoke trailed behind him. Not cigarettes, but something older, like cedar and bourbon and heat. His jacket was damp, his voice hoarse. When she asked where he'd been, he said something about a board meeting running long. She nodded. Didn't challenge, but she watched the way he touched the back of his neck when he lied. Always the same gesture, like wiping off guilt. That night she made a decision. If Tess Chandler had trusted Alexander with $11.4 million, she wanted to know why. And if Tess hadn't trusted him, but had been coerced or blackmailed or silenced, then she needed to know what for. Because right now every thread pulled toward one center point, a fortune, a lie, and a woman who might still be alive and watching. She dug deeper. She called a contact in the Caribbean, a distant cousin on her mother's side who worked in a boutique legal office out of Road Town. She sent the scanned will anonymously, pretending to be a paralegal vetting probate transfers. Within hours, the call came back. "This is active," he said, tone sharpened by surprise. "The trust isn't closed." "What do you mean?" "It's still feeding, monthly from a blind LLC." "Feeding into what?" "An investment pipeline registered under a holding company called Keston Arc. Cayman origin, but the board is US-based." "Who's the board?" He hesitated. "It's all proxies, but one name just appeared 3 months ago." She waited. "JC Holdings." Her blood went cold. James Carr. He wasn't dead. Not officially. Not yet. That night she confronted her husband without confrontation. She played the passive partner, the worried wife. She asked what he remembered about Tess. He looked up slowly from his drink. "Why?" "No reason. You used to mention her when we first met." He set the glass down. "That was a long time ago. You were close." He took a long time to answer. She was difficult to forget. Not the answer she expected. "Do you think she's really gone?" she asked, watching for the flicker in his eyes. He leaned back, studied her like she was the one on trial. "Why? Are you asking me this?" She shrugged. "No reason." But the tension didn't dissipate. It hovered, static and sour, between them. That night, they didn't touch in bed. He fell asleep fast. She didn't sleep at all. The next morning, Ava found something in the mailbox, a necklace, a simple chain with a charm shaped like a compass. When she held it up to the light, she saw the initials engraved on the back. TC. She snatched it away before Ava could ask. Her hands were trembling again. There was no note, no return address, just a gift from a ghost. A woman presumed dead who still remembered how to leave fingerprints in the mail. Was it a threat? A warning? A promise? She placed the necklace in the same cookbook where she'd hidden the photo. The 2 women, herself and Tess, now shared a hollow spine. She couldn't run. Not yet. There was too much she didn't know. And then came the second envelope. This one wasn't anonymous. It came from a law firm in Zurich. Inside, a notification of amendment. Tess's will had been updated. And the new co-beneficiary? Ava Huxley, their daughter. A child Tess had never met. A child now tied to $11.4 million and to a dead woman who refused to stay buried. She booked the ticket under a name she hadn't used since college, a middle name stitched to her mother's, maiden surname, one that had never appeared on any of their property titles, joint accounts, or wedding documents. She told her husband she was taking Ava to visit her sister in Vermont. He nodded, distracted by some board update on his tablet. He didn't ask which airport. He didn't ask which airline. She counted on his disinterest like a currency. He was losing track of the pieces on the board. She left Ava with her sister, after all, just not in Vermont. A weekend at a quiet farm outside Albany, where no one would ask questions and no one would answer them. The nanny, Lauren, played along, without hesitation. She didn't know the details, only the tone in the mother's voice, a tone that said, "Protect her." The plane to Tortola was half empty, the seats cold from underuse. She sat near the back with a paperback she didn't open and a mind that refused to slow. The documents were buried deep in her bag, stitched into a false lining, along with the compass necklace. The initials still made her fingers sweat. When she landed, the heat felt personal. The address came from her cousin's contact in Road Town, an office suite that didn't exist in any online registry, tucked inside a weathered building that bore the rust of 100 failed companies. Keston Ark, etched faintly on a metal placard at the door, was barely visible unless you knew to look. Inside, a woman in mirrored sunglasses and a blouse too crisp for island humidity met her with no smile. "You're not who I expected," the woman said. "Neither are you." The woman unlocked a cabinet. "Password?" She recited the numbers from the will. The woman pulled a file from a stack and handed it over. "This is everything. Everything that matters." Inside were transaction logs, weekly, irregular, sometimes in sums as small as $14, sometimes in amounts that would tip a small nation's GDP, all flowing through Keston Ark from a master account labeled only Solis. Node. She remembered that name from one of the surveillance letters. Mirror accounts. Collapse scenario. She flipped further. Signatures. Dates. Photos of documents with red stamps. A sudden stop in the payments. 18 months ago. And then a spike again. Exactly 10 weeks prior. Right around the time James Carr had resurfaced. Right around the time Tess Chandler had updated her will. She stared at a memo scribbled on the corner of one page. If JC refuses escrow, initiate fallback. AH already compliant. TC observation. Resumed AH, her husband, already compliant. What had he agreed to? She found a key taped to the final page. A safe deposit number, hand-scrawled 314. The address listed a bank in St. John, a ferry ride away. She thanked the woman, who simply turned back to her screen as if the moment had never happened. The ferry was slow, the kind of slow that made people feel safe. Nothing dangerous moved this leisurely. The irony wasn't lost on her. The bank was colder than the air outside. When she presented the key and a fabricated ID, the man behind the counter didn't blink. Just led her to a back room, unlocked the box and left her alone. Inside, a thumb drive, a manila envelope, and a Polaroid. She went for the envelope first, a single document, an offshore deed signed by Tess and witnessed by Daniel Mercer, granting access to a villa property in Martinique, a contingency estate. The property was listed as inactive, but tagged for reactivation on confirmed silence. She swallowed hard, then the Polaroid. 3 people, Tess, Carr, and a child no older than 5. A boy. He was holding the same compass necklace Ava had received. There was writing on the back. Just a single word. Protection. Her hands shook as she inserted the thumb drive into the laptop she'd brought, stripped of trackers and wiped clean. A folder opened. Dozens of voice memos. She played the first, Tess's voice, clear, cautious, not frightened but calculated. "If you're hearing this, I'm already gone. Not dead, just erased. Alex thinks he's smarter than me. He isn't. but he's careful. Carr was the only one who could keep him in check. Now, I don't know where Carr is. If you're the wife, I'm sorry, I really am. He isn't who you think. The inheritance isn't real, it's bait. He's laundering through your name, through your daughter. You need to go quiet, and when you find the house in Martinique, don't trust what's already inside. She slammed the laptop shut. There. It was confirmation. Not suspicion, not a theory. Her husband had not merely inherited Tess's fortune. He'd engineered it. Through shell companies, false trust assignments, and a laundering mechanism that now funneled funds through his wife and child, tokens of legitimacy, collateral. And worse, Tess had left her child somewhere. Hidden. Perhaps in the villa or elsewhere. A boy with no official name, a sibling maybe. Or a witness. She took the ferry back as the sky purpled into dusk. Back in Tortola, a message was waiting at the hotel. No envelope, just a square of paper tucked under the door. Stop digging, he knows. TC is not safe. Neither are you. No. Signature. She didn't sleep. She booked a red-eye back to New York. When she arrived at her sister's farm, Ava ran into her arms, unaware that anything in the world had shifted, but her sister handed her something with wide, worried eyes. Someone dropped this off last night. No one saw who. It was the compass necklace again. The same one. But this time the charm had been cracked open, hinged like a locket. Inside, a photo, shrunk small, her own face. Sleeping. In her bed. From the night before she left. There were no more doubts. Only the question that now stalked her waking hours. Was he watching because he feared her? Or because he needed to know exactly when to remove her? She returned home under the cover of dusk, her heartbeat a metronome counting down to something unspeakable. The driveway was exactly as she'd left it, sleek pavers unbothered by wind or dust. The luxury SUV parked precisely at the angle he favored. The windows were warm with lamplight, a curated life untouched. Except now every object was suspect, every reflection, every shadow. She didn't tell him she was coming back early. She wanted to see the house as it was when she was supposed to be gone. As he lived in her absence, the front door was unlocked. Inside, the sound of piano music floated from the back of the house. An old jazz recording he used to claim was too chaotic for his taste. She slipped out of her shoes, padded quietly down the hallway, past the untouched foyer, the absurdly perfect dining room. A glint from the hallway mirror caught her eye. A wire. Thin, curled behind the molding. She didn't stop. In the den, he sat with a drink in one hand and the phone in the other. His sleeves were rolled, hair damp from a recent shower. He didn't see her at first. His voice was low, but not quiet enough. "No, she's back Monday," he said into the phone. "That gives us time to reposition the account. Yes, Mercer can handle the cleanup if we use the fallback vessel. The Martinique file is already active." She stepped into view. He froze. The silence that followed was a chasm. "Who's Mercer?" she asked softly. He hung up. Not hurried, not guilty, just clean. Professional. The way he might end a call with a client before pivoting to a new pitch. "You weren't supposed to be back," he said, calm, no warmth, I noticed. His eyes narrowed. "Where's Ava? With people who don't answer to you. A flicker, anger, worry. Not quite either. You broke into my office," he said. "You broke into my life." He stood slowly. "You don't understand what's happening." "No," she said, stepping closer, "but I understand enough. The inheritance, Tess, Carr, Mercer, offshore fronts, the villa in Martinique, and the photos of me, of Ava, the surveillance, the money running through my name. You weren't supposed to find that, then you should have buried it deeper." The glass in his hand didn't shatter, but it should have. His grip tightened, his voice frayed at the edges. "Everything I've done," he said, "was to protect us." She laughed, bitter and dry. "Don't insult me. Tess is not who you think. She's alive." He didn't deny it. That was the moment her world tilted. Not the lies, not the crimes, but the absence of denial. The way he let the silence thicken like blood between them. "She went rogue," he finally said. "She had access to people she shouldn't have. Carr tried to stop her. I tried to contain the fallout. She didn't want to disappear. She wanted control. She's more dangerous now than she ever was when the feds were after her. Then why the will, she snapped. Why the inheritance? Why my daughter's name? He looked at her like she'd missed something simple. Because if she knows you're holding the wire, she won't cut it. Her stomach turned. I didn't hold anything. But you do now, she stepped back. You used me, you used Ava. I protected you, he said again, louder now. From the moment I met you, I knew she'd come for me eventually. I needed a firewall. You were supposed to be a clean page, her voice trembled. You married me for a paper trail. I married you, he said, softer now, because you were the only thing in this world that wasn't poisoned. Then why poison me? He looked away. I had no choice. There's always a choice. He set down the glass, walked toward her slowly, not threatening, not pleading, just moving through the wreckage of truth. I can fix this, he said. We're close. Once Mercer finalizes the conversion in Martinique, everything folds clean. We close the accounts, move under new names, start fresh. Just you, me, and Ava. I'll erase Tess, erase Carr, for good. And the boy? She asked. He stopped. What boy? She pulled the photo from her pocket, the Polaroid from the safe deposit box. Tess Carr, the child. She held it up like a mirror. Your son? His face twitched. The first genuine fracture. I don't know who that is. Try again. But he didn't. He took the photo, studied it. Too long. She realized then that the boy wasn't leverage. He was consequence. Something even he hadn't accounted for. Is he in Martinique? She asked. Silence. You said you wanted to fix this, she pressed. Then start by telling me the truth. I don't know, he said finally. Tess never told me. You were married to her. And she lied, he snapped. Just like you're lying now, pretending this isn't survivable. We can get out together, but only if you stop digging. Her body stilled. Every instinct screamed that this was the line, the final threshold between protection and threat. I don't want to survive this, she said quietly. I want to end it. He reached for her arm. Not hard, not gentle. She stepped back. Don't, she whispered. He let go, a beat passed, then another. You'll destroy everything, he said. I'm counting on it. That night she left the house again. Ava still safe. Her sister now instructed to go dark, no phones, no digital traces. In her pocket a new passport. The name she'd used to fly to the island. In her bag the thumb drive, the documents, the photo. In her chest something hardening. She called Malloy from a public phone just off the interstate. I need protection, she said. From who? From my husband. Silence. What changed? Malloy asked. Her answer was a whisper, his voice cracked. And I believed him. The detective said nothing. We'll move now, Malloy finally said. But if you have anything, proof files, bring them. We'll need to act fast. I'm going to Martinique. You'll get killed. Then make sure I don't go alone. She hung up. Above her, the stars looked cold. She booked the flight for dawn. She had one question left. If Tess had faked her death once, was she ready to do it again? And this time, would she take her place? Chapter 8. Smoke, then silence. The heat clung to her skin like a warning. Martinique greeted her not with violence, but with a silence so total it felt curated. The air held the weight of salt and rot, and something older, like the island remembered too much. She stepped from the rented car without looking back. The road had disappeared 10 minutes ago. What remained was a path choked by overgrowth, a narrow track veiled in green leading to the villa. It rose behind a wall of bougainvillea and cracked stone. Whitewashed, expansive, too large for invisibility but still somehow unseen. The architecture was old colonial wealth, tall shutters, arched balconies, pale columns stained by rain and time. The house didn't seem abandoned. It felt paused, like someone had left in a hurry or never quite arrived. She didn't knock. The key from the deed turned easily in the rusted lock. The door groaned, not from disuse but from something more intimate, hesitation. The air inside was damp and cold, the kind that settled into bones. A vase had fallen in the foyer, shards, still scattered. as if time had cracked open the space and left it to bleed. She moved room to room with careful eyes. No signs of violence, no signs of peace either. Furniture was draped, windows sealed. In the kitchen, the refrigerator still hummed. On the counter, a knife left beside a mango half-sliced, its flesh brown at the edges. Someone had left in the middle of doing something human. The second floor held the weight of memory. 3 bedrooms, 1 nursery. The crib still had a blanket, folded inside, embroidered initials long faded. On the dresser, a photograph turned face down. She lifted it gently. Tess, younger, radiant, holding a child whose eyes mirrored her own. But not the boy from the Polaroid. This child was smaller, newer. The timeline shifted again. Another secret. Downstairs again, a study. Books untouched. A wall safe behind a peeling oil painting of a storm. Same code. Always the same code. She entered the yacht number. The lock clicked. Inside, documents, passports, a black flash drive, and a single handwritten note. It wasn't addressed. No names, just 3 words underlined twice. If she returns. The pen had pressed too hard on the last letter. Not desperation, intention. She pocketed the drive and turned. That's when she noticed it. A faint smell she hadn't registered before. Not mold, not dust, smoke. It wasn't coming from outside. It was inside the house, thin, acrid, rising slow from the vents. She moved fast. Back through the hall, past the broken vase, down into the service corridor behind the kitchen. A control panel blinked red near the floor. Remote ignition. Someone had triggered a timed burn. The system was silent but efficient. Upstairs again, into the nursery. She took the blanket, wrapped it around the drive, the documents, the photo. Back downstairs, the air thicker now, the smoke climbing the walls like a slow tide. She exited through the rear veranda, barefoot on the dew-wet tiles. No one in sight, not a soul on the winding path. But she knew this wasn't abandonment. Someone had been here, someone had waited, and someone somewhere had just watched her step into a trap and slip out again. By nightfall, she was at a hotel, under a false name. The drive revealed a full ledger. Keston Arc accounts, mirrored entities, financial loops that tied every player to the same invisible center. Tess, Carr, Mercer, and her husband. The last file was encrypted. She didn't try to open it, not yet. She needed leverage more than knowledge now. Her phone buzzed. Burner line. A number she didn't recognize. No voice, just breathing. Then, a whisper. You saw the boy. She didn't answer. She let the silence speak, then the voice again. He's not mine, he's yours. Click. The phone went dark. The smoke was still in her hair, on her skin, like a reminder. In the morning, she watched Ava sleep through the baby monitor her sister had brought from the farm. The child stirred once, then settled. Peaceful. Unknowing. Downstairs, the compass necklace sat on the kitchen table, cracked open. She hadn't opened the safe in their home since returning. She didn't need to. She knew what waited there. Not just the photos or the gun or the forged deeds. What waited was the echo of a life constructed around omission. There would be no confrontation. Not now. Maybe not ever. Some truths didn't need a spotlight. Some burns were clean. She left the drive in a sealed envelope on Malloy's desk that afternoon. Anonymous, untraceable. She included one photo. The boy holding the compass. Nothing else. She didn't wait for a reply. That night, the wind changed, and somewhere far away, a villa lay in ruin, its memory exhaling in smoke. The illusion of stillness cracked on a Wednesday. She had made herself a shadow, slipping through the corners of her life with intention. No bank accounts, no routines. Ava homeschooled under false records. Burner phones rotated weekly. Even the nanny had been replaced. Lauren sent abroad on a scholarship she never applied for. The new woman, Carla, was vetted, quiet, and carried a pocket knife she didn't hide. But paranoia doesn't cure danger. It prepares for it. The intrusion came at 3:12 a.m., not with shattered glass, but with the silent activation of a motion sensor that wasn't supposed to be active. She had rigged it herself, wired into the garage light circuit, independent of Wi-Fi. It was supposed to be invisible. And it lit up. She was already out of bed when the hallway camera blinked once and then died. Not glitched, killed. She moved like muscle memory now, straight to Ava's room, blanket in one hand, the flash drive in the other. Ava stirred, but didn't wake. The front door was still locked, the windows sealed, no alarm triggered. That meant one thing: someone had the codes. The crawl space behind the laundry room was cramped, but insulated. She slipped Ava inside first, wrapped tight, no sound. Then she backed in after, pulling the wood panel shut. The darkness was immediate, her breathing the only thing she could hear. Minutes passed. Footsteps didn't echo like they did in the movies. They padded, deliberate and soft, like the person walking had studied the home's layout, like they belonged. A vase moved, ceramic shifting against wood, then the stairs. One creak, just one. She didn't cry, she didn't shiver. She counted the seconds, then silence, then the smell. Cologne she knew, clean, sharp. The same scent as the suit he'd worn on the day he swore they were safe again. She stayed hidden for another hour, long after the footsteps vanished, long after the front door opened and never quite closed. When she emerged, Ava still slept. Peacefully, as if none of it was real. But the silence left behind wasn't empty. On the kitchen counter, beside the coffee grinder, a single sheet of paper had been left. No threats. No demands, just a printed screenshot of a bank transfer. $750,000 wired from a Cayman account to an American fund labeled under Ava's name, and below it, handwritten in dark ink, "You were never the firewall." She was. She didn't sleep. The next night or the one after. By the third day, she booked a cabin in the Adirondacks, far from signal, far from memory. Malloy was unreachable, either reassigned or buried. The envelope she'd left had been received, but no action followed. No headlines. No arrests, only money. Clean, steady, terrifying money. She began to suspect something worse than conspiracy. Collusion. She studied the files again. One encrypted document on the flash drive still refused to open, its firewall too sophisticated. She didn't have the tools to break it, but someone might. She drove 12 hours straight through rain and fog, to an address in Baltimore whispered to her by a name she didn't fully trust. A retired intelligence analyst who once disappeared a telecom scandal before it touched court. The man lived above a bookstore, half blind, half drunk, but brilliant. He opened the file with a shrug and a mutter, and then he stopped speaking. On the screen, a recording. Not audio. Video time-stamped, grainy, filmed through glass. It showed a hospital room, a crib, a woman in the corner, gaunt and still. Tess, alive, watching something, or someone. Then a second crib, barely visible. 2 children, and in the reflection of the glass, a man, her husband, not from 8 years ago, recent, less than a year. The analyst leaned back slowly. "This wasn't inheritance," he said. "It was storage." She didn't speak, just copied the file. The truth wasn't a shape anymore, it was a pressure. It lived in the space between motives and math. Her husband hadn't just laundered money. He had laundered people, identities, children. And at some point he had stopped knowing which lies belonged to whom. She returned home with a plan not yet born, and in her mailbox, another envelope, no letter, no threat, just a photograph. Tess, alive, holding Ava's hand, and both of them smiling. She stood in the doorway for nearly an hour before stepping inside. The house smelled of pine cleaner and insulation, like a memory being erased mid-sentence. Nothing was where she had left it. The chairs had been adjusted, the rug realigned. Even the photos on the staircase, those carefully neutral portraits, were reordered. Not stolen, not vandalized, rearranged. As if someone had needed to remind her, this house still belonged to him. Or to something worse. Upstairs, Ava slept, unaware. Her daughter's world remained mercifully untouched by the tendrils reaching beneath their lives. But innocence was not insulation. It was bait. And the photo she now held, Ava smiling, Tess's hand gently over hers, rewrote every assumption. Tess had seen her child, not just seen, touched. The image couldn't have been manipulated. Her analyst confirmed it. Metadata was intact. The photo had been taken 3 days prior. Time-stamped. GPS tagged to somewhere near Montpellier, France. A place Tess had never been associated with, until now. Which meant this wasn't a standoff, it was a rotation. Tess had emerged. Ava had been accessed, and her husband, Alexander, had done nothing to stop it. Which meant only one possibility remained: he was enabling it. She waited for his return not like a wife, not like a victim, but like someone preparing to dismantle a building from its foundation. The weapon she held wasn't the gun hidden in the laundry vent. It wasn't the drive or the documents or the safe key she had relocated 3 weeks prior. It was knowledge, finally whole. He arrived late, always late now, hair wet, tie loose, the performance of exhaustion, not its presence. He kissed her cheek. She did not move. He poured bourbon. She watched him take the first sip before speaking. "Where is she?" He didn't pretend to misunderstand. That was the last courtesy he offered. "Gone," he said. "Where?" He swirled the drink but didn't answer. "I saw the footage," she said. "The cribs, the hospital. You were there with both children." "Two?" He nodded. Quiet. Like a man surrendering not to guilt but to inevitability. "She wasn't supposed to carry both to term," he said, the words brittle. "One was meant for the ledger, the other for continuity. You divided them. Asset and anchor." The language was monstrous, so casual, like a man discussing logistics, not life. "But she changed the terms," he continued, "after Carr disappeared, after Mercer folded his contract. Tess wanted visibility, wanted Ava protected in the open, so the inheritance was structured to make Ava public. And the boy vanished with her." She moved then, slowly. Opened the drawer beneath the record player. The burner phone was still there. She slid it across the table. "I got a call," she said. "He's yours." He exhaled through his nose as if that particular truth was somehow disappointing. "I don't know anymore," he said. "I haven't in years." Then silence. "You brought this to us," she said. "I kept you alive," he replied. "You turned our daughter into leverage." "I turned her into a firewall." He didn't flinch when she opened the laundry vent and removed the gun. He didn't beg, or explain, or rush toward her. He simply set the glass down and stood still, as if he had waited for this moment to arrive, not with fear, but with structure. She raised the gun. Her hand didn't shake. "Did you know Tess was watching her?" "Yes." "For how long?" "Since the divorce papers were drafted." "You were never divorced." In every way that mattered. She could have pulled the trigger. The weight in her hand said justice. The distance between them said mercy. But in that moment she realized that death was a gift he didn't deserve. Not yet. Instead, she reached for her bag and tossed the drive onto the floor between them. "That file goes live in 12 hours, she said. "Multiple outlets, European authorities. If anything happens to me or Ava, if I even sense movement, we go viral. You don't get to pull the strings anymore. You don't get to vanish." He didn't pick up the drive. He didn't move. She turned toward the stairs. At the top, Ava stood in her pajamas, barefoot, silent. The compass necklace hung from her small hand. She didn't ask questions. She simply said, "I'm ready." And the three of them stood like that for one moment more. Two parents in a house already burning, and a child too wise to cry. They left before dawn, not running, redefining. The car was packed with only what could pass through customs unnoticed. A worn stuffed bear, 3 passports and a new name etched into each. No tears, no goodbyes, just the sound of tires kissing wet asphalt and a mother scanning the rearview mirror for anything more than headlights. There were no police bulletins, no alerts. That was the brilliance of it. Their disappearance wouldn't register as a disappearance at all. They were ghosts now, built from the scraps of a marriage and a lie. Montpellier was colder than expected. A stone apartment above a pharmacy, too small and too quiet, but perfect. No cameras, no connections. Her contact had arranged it through A network of favors so old they no longer had names, only obligations. There was no furniture when they arrived. Ava sat on the hardwood with her back to the wall, humming to herself, the way children do when they sense the tension but don't yet know its shape. She watched her daughter sleep that first night and remembered the sound of fire eating the villa. The smoke hadn't just marked their escape, it had erased a chapter. But fire doesn't kill memory, it only buries it beneath ash. In the silence, she replayed everything. Tess's voice in the recording, Alexander's eyes when the truth came, the photograph of the boy holding the compass. The unspoken things were always the sharpest. She didn't contact Malloy. The detective had vanished into early retirement, a choice she understood now not as cowardice, but as clarity. The machine was too large. The people behind it, Mercer, the offshore handlers, the dead witnesses, had not been destroyed. They had simply moved deeper into the current. This wasn't about justice anymore. It was about obstruction, leverage, and survival. The drive still existed, hidden in a waterproof pouch beneath the floorboards, its contents untouched. The final file, the video, the hospital cribs, the mirrored faces, was insurance. That was the new architecture of her life. Every room mapped by exits, every friendship measured in silence, every plan double-blinded. Ava never asked about her father again. She did not miss him. The man she remembered had already been a shell. By the end, hollowed out by choices he'd made long before she was born. Once, while they walked the narrow streets of the city, Ava pointed at a street violinist and said, "He looks like the man from the dream." She didn't press. She didn't need to. Dreams were where the ghosts lived now, and they were many. Then the envelope arrived. No stamps, no return, just slid beneath the door like a threat wearing the skin of coincidence. Inside, a single photograph. The boy, older now, 7, maybe 8, holding the same compass necklace, its hinge rusted open. Behind him, the same neutral backdrop, white stucco Mediterranean light. And there, behind his shoulder, Tess, not smiling, not hiding, watching the lens as if she knew who would eventually receive it. She didn't burn it, not this one. Instead, she taped it to the underside of the drawer where the drive lay hidden, not as a shrine, not as a warning, but as a ledger entry. Proof that the cycle hadn't closed, only paused, that Tess was alive and the boy was growing, and Ava had a brother who might one day walk through a door with questions too old to answer. She made no plans to find them, but she made no plans to avoid them either. Years moved differently after that. Quiet days folded into each other like silk. New jobs, new faces, a rhythm built from coffee spoons and morning walks. Ava flourished, unburdened by the structure that once used her as a firewall. She learned to swim in cold rivers, to paint with oils, to lie gently when someone asked where she was from. One spring morning, a man passed them in the market. Tall, familiar gait. He didn't stop, didn't look, but something in her froze. The shape of memory wrapped in another man's skin. That night she stayed up until dawn watching the windows, holding the drive in one hand, the compass in the other. The file was never published. That was the power now, the threat, not the act. Her husband knew, and so did Tess. Everyone played their piece carefully. One wrong move and the whole history would bloom open in fire. She never changed her name again. The one she chose for herself here was quiet. Honest. A name Ava whispered in sleep. The past had become a pressure, constant, invisible, forming everything. But Ava was growing up and the boy was still out there, and somewhere far away, a woman named Tess Chandler waited for the moment the silence would break. Smoke, then silence. Then perhaps the sound of a lock turning again,